闇を欺いて切なを交わして刃すり抜け奴らの隙をつけ貫いた想いが未来を開く
Hey guys, it's Brandon, and today I'm going to be reviewing South Park: The Fractured Butthole. I've been excited for this game for quite some time, and I'm glad to be finally reviewing it for you guys. I do want to warn you now that there might be some spoilers for this game's predecessor, The Stick of Truth, but I'm going to try to keep them minimal since it's not totally required to have played the first one to really enjoy this one. Here's what I'm going to grade it on, and now let's just get into it. Now, quite possibly the biggest draw for anyone to a South Park game has got to be the writing. With the way that The Stick of Truth felt just like playing through a season of the show, a lot of pressure was on Trey Parker and Matt Stone to deliver another game of the same quality. Thankfully, I can definitely say that they did. In The Fractured Butthole, a wave of crime is hitting South Park, and Eric Cartman is determined to do something about it. Unfortunately, the town's superheroes are currently divided over stupid political issues, so Cartman must travel back in time and assemble his team to stop the crime wave and use the reward money to kickstart their movie franchise, making them millions of dollars in the process. Though they could have easily gone with the medieval fantasy theme a little further, I'm glad that they switched it up and went with the superhero theme. It really helped keep things fresh and allowed Trey and Matt to draw on a whole other side of the lore they've established in the show over the years. Much like in The Stick of Truth, the game is rife with references to a bunch of South Park episodes, even bringing in some of the newer stuff that's been established in the show since the last game. It genuinely feels like a ton of care was put into writing this game, and it shows every step of the way. The story missions are great, the side missions are hilarious, the Kyle missions were by far the best, and even just exploring the town was fun and packed with Easter eggs for longtime fans. I will say that the ending to this one felt a bit weaker than the last, but I just kind of feel like that might be mostly due to the time travel being a major factor in the story. It's pretty hard to do time travel right, and though I feel like they mostly pulled it off, it really doesn't quite land as well as I would have hoped. That said, everything leading up to the end is great, and the third night in particular is where shit starts to get extra ridiculous. In addition to the main story, many of the people that you talk to while just exploring the town offer some pretty funny one-liners. Probably my favorite one was the guy on his phone near the bus station that was like, "Yeah, this bus was supposed to be here back in December," alluding to the many delays that the game ended up going through. The world building, though a bit less prevalent than in the last game, is still neat, and the town still manages to feel alive and well. Now, I think it goes without saying that there are a lot of offensive jokes to be had over the course of the game, but if you're playing a South Park game and not expecting that, you're really in the wrong place. Though the game does get offensive, I still think it does so without going to just being edgy for the sake of being edgy. Even when lampooning social justice, The Fractured Butthole manages to actually be pretty inclusive by allowing you to identify as any gender identity, sexuality, race, ethnicity, religion, and alignment that you want, really allowing you to flesh out your character and be exactly who you want to be. Honestly, it was overall just a joy to be in the world of South Park again. For story, I have to give Fractured Butthole a 9 out of 10. While The Stick of Truth was your standard turn-based RPG a la Super Mario RPG with timed commands to make your attacks stronger, The Fractured Butthole steps it up a bit by adding a full grid for you to move around in and interact with during battle. The game is still turn-based, but when it's your turn, you can move a set amount of spaces around the grid and position yourself strategically so that you can either knock enemies into each other, your allies, or environmental hazards that litter the area. Though it's not a huge change, I really found that the addition of the grid helped to keep combat from going stale in later portions of the game, which was a big issue with Stick of Truth. Later fights added a ton of different objectives and hazards in the area, so you always had to be on your toes when fighting, unlike the last one where you basically just had to use whatever move put the most status effects on your enemy and then you won. In addition to the grid, you also gain access to a new plethora of fart-related powers, expanding a bit on what the Stick of Truth established. In this one, you get time farts, which can be used to skip enemy attacks, pause the battle to allow you to do free damage, or summon a clone of yourself to assist you in battle. These skills are invaluable later in the game, and there's a certain secret boss that I'm convinced is impossible to beat without the summon ability, which really helps to retain the freshness of combat. One small downside to the combat later on in the game comes from the way the class system works. At the beginning, you go through your origin story and choose one of 3 basic classes to build your character. Each class has 4 abilities and you have 4 ability slots. As the game goes on, you begin to multi-class, which is pretty neat and gives you more options on how to build your character. However, towards the end of the game, you gain access to all the abilities of every class, and the 4 ability limit begins to feel a little bit restrictive. I would have liked to be able to do just a little more mixing and matching with powers, but the fact that you get to multi-class at all in this one is a big step up from being confined to just one class in the last game, even if it can be kinda hard to choose which powers you want. As with the Stick of Truth, the Fractured Butthole isn't all combat. A lot of focus is set on exploring the town and solving puzzles, to either find collectibles to help people around the town, or progress through story missions. I found the puzzles to be pretty easy for the most part, and I did enjoy the buddy ability system much more than the items from the last game, like the anal probe. However, the town exploration part I think was actually a pretty big letdown, especially when compared to the last game. The town feels way smaller this time around and really much less interesting. There's no expansive sewer system like the last one, and Canada's completely walled off now like it is in the show. I mean, I understand the Canada bit since it's a big plot point in the show, and honestly, it's pretty funny to go up there and get harassed by the guy on the wall, but I feel like they could have potentially opened up more of the town or the surrounding areas for exploration much more than they did. With a world as big as South Park's, I would think that there's no end to what they could do with potential game locations. Either way, the combat is very solid, the puzzles are somewhat interesting, and the game manages to stay fresh and doesn't drag on too badly towards the end. For gameplay, the Fractured But Whole gets an 8 out of 10. If there's one area where I'd say this game definitely excels, it's graphics. As with the last one, the game looks exactly like you're sitting down and just watching a season of the show. The animation is spot on and consistent with how it is in the show, and the characters all look great. One addition that I actually really enjoyed as far as graphics go is the fact that every boss or unique enemy has a splash card that introduces them when you first encounter them. Each of these little cards looks fantastic and has a really unique design. If I can find some of them on Google, I'll throw them up right here so you can see what I'm talking about. Again, character animations look great both in and out of combat, and all of the effects from the different moves look great as well. I'm really not sure how much else I can say about this game's graphics other than it's just really true to the show and it does it very well. I think the footage I've been playing so far pretty well represents that. In the graphics department, Fractured But Whole gets a 9 out of 10. When it comes to sound, the Fractured But Whole is kind of an interesting case. I legitimately couldn't really remember any tracks off of the soundtrack except for 2 right after I finished the game. But when I went back through the OST for this review, I actually found that I really enjoyed a lot of the songs that the game had to offer. The biggest high point of the soundtrack definitely comes in the second mission that you do with Kyle. I don't want to spoil what happens, but the song that they choose for the mini-boss that you fight during that mission was an awesome instrumental cover of a classic song from the show, and when I finally put together what song was playing, I had the biggest goofy smile on my face for the rest of the fight. Though I really didn't retain any of the songs that played throughout the game, other than that one and the one that played in the strip club scene, I still think the soundtrack is pretty solid and definitely worth a few more listens after playing. On the other hand, the sound effects in the game were great and went a long way to making the fights more fun. They really managed to add a lot of weight to your attacks, especially when you knock an enemy into an environmental hazard or into one of your allies. And of course, the fart sounds were pretty well done after having to hear them all game. For sound, I'd give the Fractured But Whole an 8 out of 10, only because the songs actually are genuinely good. It just might take a couple listens for you to really retain them. Now, if there's one area where I'd have to say that the Fractured But Whole is lacking, it's definitely in replayability. The story is the main draw for this game, and after going through it once, there's really not a ton of reason to go back. The collectibles, secret boss, and metric ton of social media friends that you have to collect are alright for padding out the length of the game, but the only reason I'd really play through the game again is to try and get the Token Experience achievement, which requires you to play as an African American character with the combat difficulty set to the hardest option. In all, I'd have to give the Fractured But Whole a 5 out of 10 in replayability. There are some reasons to play it again if you're a completionist and just want to see everything the game has to offer, but really just about everything you can get done within your first playthrough of the game. Now, after tallying up the scores, South Park: The Fractured But Whole gets a 78 out of 100 or a C+. Now, this may seem like a pretty low grade for how much I was praising it earlier, but I really do promise you this game is worth your time. Though it's only really good for one playthrough, I'd have to say that playthrough is an awesome experience and really hits a lot of the same high points that the last game did. For fans of the series, I'd say it's a must-have, and I'm really excited to see where they take the South Park games from here, whether it's with sequels or a DLC or what have you. Now, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, that helps me out. Feel free to subscribe, and if you've played the game, let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you enjoyed it, let me know what your favorite parts were, what you thought was funny, and if you had a good time with it. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.
Say, everybody haven't seen my balls, they're big and salty and brown. If you ever need a quick pick-me-up, just stick my balls in your mouth. Ooh, suck on my chocolate salted balls. Stick 'em in your mouth and suck 'em.